last week, I asked us a question, and that question is this. I asked us, what will it take for us to become those who help others encounter Jesus? What is required of us? Like, what is it going to take to make us those who are, when we go places, when we interact with people, we know that Jesus is with us and that he's just waiting to meet people through our presence with them. What is that going to require of us? And what we emphasized last week is that for the cultural time and place that we live in, one of the key answers to this question is hospitality. That hospitality is actually what is required of us. So for the remainder of the summer, we are kind of aiming ourselves at this goal of becoming hospitable. So become hospitable. Build deep relationships with people who God is drawing to faith in Jesus. And that's really what hospitality is about. Hospitality is about being able to welcome somebody as if they're family. Even though you might not know them, you're building the kind of relationship with them, and maybe even taking the relationship steps further, steps ahead of them. You're loving them with a kind of familial love, even though they're not in your family, even though you don't know them that well. We're building relationships with people that God is drawing to faith in Jesus. And so, we said how hospitality is a value here. We talk about it a lot as a value. Yes, it is a strategy for us. So we actually believe that the more hospitable we are, the more people that we will see come to faith in Jesus. But at the same time, hospitality is like just a way of life, right? It is a core Christian characteristic. Meaning, like, Jesus saves us, and he begins changing us, and he intends us to become more like him. And you cannot become more like Jesus without becoming hospitable. Like, if you are going to be like Jesus, then that means you will be hospitable. And here's what I realize. There are particular challenges that make it difficult for us to live hospitably. Like, there are difficulties of this. Part of it is that we all kind of come with baggage that we carry from our past. And that baggage kind of affects the way that we love other people and the way that we are able to love other people. We all have been shaped and formed in particular ways. And here's the thing. We all have been affected by sin at a soul level, in ways by sin at a soul level that are in opposition to hospitality. There are things inside of us that are actually working against hospitality that Jesus is trying to bring about. So on one hand, you have, this goal that we're aiming at of becoming hospitable. But then on the other hand, you have barriers to hospitality. Right? There are barriers in the world and barriers in our souls that are in direct conflict with becoming hospitable. And so over the next 3 weeks, we're going to be exploring a series called Barriers to Hospitality, in order to explore kind of the things that keep us from being hospitable, the things that keep us from loving people well. And we're going to explore what we can actually do about those things. So I'm going to start by sharing kind of a story of history, a timeline of technology. So in 1455, the printing press was invented. Now, for ages, do you know how people kept records of things? They wrote them down on pieces of paper by hand, and then they took those pieces of paper and handed them to somebody else, and then those people made copies of those things by hand and wrote things down on pieces of paper. This took a very long time. What it meant is that there were very few copies of original documents of things, because it just took so long to sit down and write things out. And then the printing press was invented, and it completely transformed the way that we kept records. It ensured that we were actually able to copy records at an incredibly quick pace. And so this transformed communication and it transformed record keeping. And then after the printing press, so then 1765, next big technological endeavor was the invention of the steam engine. This transformed travel. It ensured that you didn't have to ride on the back of a horse to get somewhere or ride on a buggy to get somewhere, but that people started building trains and building railroads and building ships that could take us across, didn't have to rely on the wind to get them somewhere, but that could actually be driven by steam. And then in 1876, you had the invention of the telephone. which sped up communication. It meant that I didn't have to wait for you to deliver a letter from me, or letter from you to me from across the country. Like, you could call me and talk to me. Like, we didn't have to have this interruption in our communication. In 1879, the electric light bulb. Now, I don't know if you realize this, but the electric light bulb was the most incredible invention that you could come up with, because people only used to work like when it was light outside. That's the only time that they worked. That's the only time you could get anything done. That's like, or you had to use candlelight, but I mean, that's an incredibly inefficient and hard way to do things. And so most people, you know what they did? They were awake when it was light out, and they slept when it was dark. It's just a crazy, crazy thought, but that's what happened. And this utterly transformed the way that people work, the way that people get things done. We're going to keep going. In 1901, the radio was invented. It transformed our relationship to information. Now you could take a little bit of information, and instead of having to put it in newspapers and it taking 3 or 4 days to get out, now instantaneously, as somebody says something, it gets transferred across the country, and people can listen to the radio and figure out what's going on. In 1937, the very first computer was invented, and this sped up computation, logic. It turned information into a math problem, and then it made it so that you could process that information at a faster rate, so that you could come up with answers to questions that it took us a long time to come up with answers to. In 1974, they took that computer that used to fill an entire room in order to process these computations, and they started making it smaller and smaller, and so the personal computer was invented. And this took something that was only like inside government agencies and gave it to you. Like, you could have your own computer. You could take this processing power and have it to yourself. In 1989, the World Wide Web was invented. This sped up the transfer of information across the globe. It like closed the distance between people. Now you could have people who have interests from all parts of the globe getting together and talking about their interests in real time, like as things are happening. In 2002, the smartphone was invented. And what that did is it compressed all of the things that we've talked about so far into a little tiny rectangle that you could fit inside your pocket. And you're like, well, what about the steam engine? You have an Uber app on your phone. You can call a car to come get you and take you somewhere. And then in 2017, the most recent technological development that we're still kind of reeling through and figuring out what it means is artificial intelligence, which transforms the speed at which we process ideas. So like the computer and the calculator took math and made math much easier to do. What artificial intelligence is doing is it's taking ideas and concepts, and it's like a computer for ideas and concepts. Right? So you can say, give me the information, or synchronize. Like, I say a lot of things on Sunday morning. I could input all of the words that I say on a Sunday morning into artificial intelligence. In fact, this is what I do. I'm gonna give away a little bit of the game here. The questions that you get in your bulletin, I take all of the words that I write in my sermon, and I put it in to an artificial intelligence system, and I say, spit out for me, 20 questions based on these notes that I've developed here. And it does it. You know how long it takes me? That takes like an hour out of my time. It's work that I don't have to do. And then I do a little bit of editing of the questions, right? I make them make sense. But it's like a computer for words. It's a computer for ideas. Okay, so I don't know how comfortable any of you are with that, but I just, so you're like, I don't know if I like that. I'm not sure. But the result of all of this is that life used to be lived at a very slow pace. But technology has transformed what we are able to accomplish and the pace at which we are able to accomplish it. We can get more done more quickly, and the pace of technological development is actually it's not slowing down. It's increasing exponentially. The rate at which we can get things done. You know, the things on the horizon, cold fusion. I don't know if you know what that means for energy and everything, but that's like on the horizon. And quantum computing. Both of these realities, again, they're like we are looking at transformation upon transformation of the speed at which we are able to do things. And here's the point. We can consume more information than we were ever able to consume before. We can accomplish more tasks than we ever could before. We can connect to a larger number of people than we were ever able to connect, and then at an exponentially faster rate than any point in world history. And the rate is only increasing, and the overall result is that life moves faster because the world moves faster. So I was talking to Pastor Don about this week, and he talked about just simply the transition from the fax machine to email, right? Like it used to be that when somebody called you and needed a record of something, you would say, well, okay, I'm in the middle of something right now. I can fax that to you like in about 5 or 6 hours, right? If they needed a record or something that you had in your files or something like that. Today, like if somebody's in the middle of their own meeting and they're like, hey, I need this record, the expectation is that you're able to get to your email and get it to them right away. Right? And all of that kind of transforms how we relate to work and how we process things together. So if we're not careful, we will let the world set the pace of our lives. And we will fall prey into believing and saying something that all of us in this room have believed and said at some point, and that is this: I'm just so busy. I'm just so busy. Right? So theoretically, technology is supposed to free us up. It's supposed to take things off of our plate. But more often than not, we let the pace that is established conform us into putting more things onto our plate. And it's really, really easy for us to let busyness and how much we can accomplish become a badge of honor for us, when in reality, what it does is it becomes a barrier to hospitality. So we're gonna study this morning a story of Jesus together and consider what it would take for us to remove that barrier. So we defined hospitality last week. Hospitality is this. It is to welcome a stranger as if they're family. It is hospitality is 2 Greek words put together. The first one is philos. We get the word Philadelphia, brotherly love, from it. But the city of brotherly love from it. But philos means to love someone as if they're family. And xenos is the word stranger. Right, so it's just literally to love the stranger as if they're family. And so Luke 8:40, it tells us a story about Jesus, and we're going to look at this and what it means for hospitality this morning. Luke 8:40, verse 40 says this: Now when Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. It's important before we get too far into this story to not lose sight of something. Jesus knew who he was ministering to. He knew who he had responsibility for. Like he had committed his life to kind of a full-time emphasis in ministry. He didn't have any kind of side gig or anything like that. He had clarity that like his full-time energy is going to a particular group of people. And his goal with this people was to show them hospitality. Right? He was loving them and caring for them and teaching them. And so he had clarity on the people to whom he was to show hospitality. So I want us to notice something about Jesus, and that is that he intentionally planned and prioritized his rhythms of hospitality. Jesus knew what he was doing. He was very intentional. He was very clear about who he was to reach. So he had made a group of people in the area called Galilee his priority. Right? Those are the people that he was going to. He had regular rhythms of speaking to these people. He had regular rhythms of teaching and praying for them. He had regular rhythms of spending time with them. He had regular rhythms of extending mercy to them and giving them compassion and extending healing. He had regular rhythms of blessing these people. And his regular rhythms of being with them created the kind of relationship that would open up his life to them. Right? So we talk about being approachable. Right? It was because of the time that Jesus spent with these people and the things that they observed while he was spending time with them, that they felt like they could come to him, that they could ask things of him, that they could approach him. And so he lived like this, and they were willing and able to approach him. And so if you're a follower of Jesus, we're looking at Jesus as kind of example to us, we need to be really clear about something. You have people too. Right? You have a particular group of people that God has given you responsibility for. Right? People who are made in the image of God, and God has said to you, these people are your personal ministry. They're nobody else's personal ministry. These are the people who he has put in your sphere of influence. And so, let's also say, if you're a spouse, your spouse is your first ministry, right? And if you're a parent, then parenting your children, you have children in the home, that's next on your priority list. But no matter what your roles might be, it's clear, he made all of us to have room in our lives for more than just those people. And so the following ought to be true of all of us, that every follower of Jesus has room to, number one, minister to their families, right? It's at the top of the list, right? We can't neglect that. If we fail that, then the other pieces are going to fail, right? But we have, number one, to minister to their families. Every follower of Jesus has room to, number two, minister to the family of God, right? We have responsibility within the church, within the people that he has called us to kind of do life with and follow Jesus with. We have that responsibility shared among us. But then every follower of Jesus has room to minister to the unchurched and the de-churched. Right? As we think about who are the people in my personal ministry sphere that Jesus has given to me, that I have responsibility for, we could find people in each of these categories in that sphere. And so we need to realize who is in this sphere that we've been given. Now, it's going to look different for each person. Right? Not every person in our sphere is going to receive the same level of time and energy from us. That was also true, by the way, of Jesus' personal ministry sphere. He didn't spend all of his time with the crowds. In fact, he prioritized the disciples, the 12, right? And then, of course, he didn't have a spouse or kids. So there's, his time can be expanded. His energy is kind of focused on that ministry sphere. But your hospitality sphere, it's worth saying, will probably be smaller than Jesus's. We could acknowledge that. But the point is that everybody does have a hospitality sphere, right? We have people that we have been given. We all need to take stock of the people who have placed in our spheres of influence and say, okay, Jesus, who is it that I have responsibility for? Who is it that you've placed in my sphere? So pastors, I participated in this thing through the Billy Graham Center called Church Evangelism Institute, and it's basically about how we build hospitable churches, how we build churches that are able to reach the unchurched and the de-churched. And so I participated in a group with other pastors. I also happen to be coaching some cohorts right now of other pastors as well. And it's interesting. It is amazing the number of pastors who confess to being too busy to minister to the unchurched and de-churched. Right? Pastors are notoriously busy. And I mean, it's not surprising, especially if a church owns a building, you have a building to take care of, you have property to take care of, you have different ministries that need your energy, you have people who probably need counseling and some processing and some timing. So there's a lot of things that can kind of fill up your time as a pastor. And so 2 out of 3 of every pastor in every cohort, 2 out of 3 of those pastors acknowledge that they have very little relationship with unchurched people. And yet, they know that if their churches are going to reach the unchurched, that their people need to spend time with unchurched people. Here's the thing, though. If the leader does not live the example, the people won't follow. Right? If the leaders are not living it out, people won't follow in the way that you want it to go. And so the first 2 months of the cohort with these pastors are spending time and saying to pastors, hey, you need to take stock of your time and ask the question, what is it going to take for me to open up my life to more unchurched people? What is it going to take for me to die to my busyness so that I can open up my life to more unchurched people? So we're going to look at some really practical strategies for that and the so what's. But we're going to keep looking at this example of Jesus in Luke 8. So Jesus, he has this regular rhythm of hospitality with the crowds. He's consistently engaging. He knows who his responsibility is. Verse 41, it says this. And there came a man named Jairus, who was a ruler of the synagogue. And falling at Jesus' feet, he implored him to come to his house. For he had an only daughter about 12 years of age, and she was dying. So undoubtedly, Jairus questioned whether or not he should go to see Jesus. He questioned probably for a long time because we're kind of at the most urgent point in this situation with his daughter. Because here's the thing, the people in the synagogue really didn't like Jesus. He disrupted things significantly for them. So for Jairus, a leader in the synagogue, to come to Jesus, this is a pretty big deal. Like his daughter's situation has progressed to a point where he is desperate enough to take a chance by going to ask Jesus for help. Right? He's in a vulnerable place. And based on what he's heard about Jesus, he's got a pretty good idea that Jesus is going to be able to help him. And so Jairus, he gives this display of faith, right? He takes the chance. He risks whatever social issues are going on to go and talk to Jesus. And that's a really unique opportunity that has been put in front of Jesus, right? So Jesus, what he does is he allows his normal, regular rhythm with the crowds to be interrupted. He lets himself be interrupted by Jairus. So I want you to take note of two things. I want you to take note first that Jesus was interruptible. Right? That's a significant part of how he operated with people. He was interruptible. You could approach him. You could ask him to do that, and he would stop what he's doing and address the need of the moment, right? So he was interruptible. And number two, I want you to take note of why Jesus was interruptible. So we'll continue on and look for that. It goes on in verse 42, and it says this: as Jesus went, the people pressed around him. Verse 43, and there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years. And though she had spent all her living on physicians, she could not be healed by anyone. This woman is in a desperate situation. I want you to also know the social situation that she is in, because she is now perpetually unclean. The bleeding issue that she has made her perpetually unclean, which not only means that she can't participate in normal religious life, it also means that she cannot touch anyone. Because whatever she touches also becomes unclean. That's what the rules in Leviticus says. Whatever she touches also becomes unclean. So in the world where we live, here's the thing. The way the Old Testament views things is basically like uncleanness is contagious. Right? You have to keep unclean things separated from the camp. It's contagious. But here's the thing. Jesus is different. With Jesus, in Jesus' case, his cleanness is contagious. So verse 44, she came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment, and immediately her discharge of blood ceased. So verse 45, Jesus said, who was it that touched me? And when all denied it, Peter said, Master, the crowds, they surround you and are pressing in on you. Everybody's touching you. Are you kidding? What are you talking about? Jesus said, someone touched me, for I perceive that power has gone out from me. So remember Jesus' situation right here. He had a regular rhythm that he is engaging with the crowds, But he allowed that rhythm to be interrupted by Jairus, and Jairus has a very urgent situation, right? So on the way to helping Jairus with his urgent and desperate situation, what does he do? He stops. He stops. Like once again, we see that Jesus is interruptible. Right? So much so that he allows his interruption to be interrupted. And so can you imagine living like this? Living slow and open enough that you would let even your interruptions be interrupted? Right? Do you know how clear you have to be on knowing what is the will of the Father in every single moment? Do you know how kind of attentive you have to be to what the Holy Spirit is up to in every situation? But Jesus is living slowly. Now, it doesn't feel slow because these are very urgent situations that are approaching him, but he is living slowly and very open to, okay, Father, what's next? What's the next thing you're going to bring into my path? He's so unhurried. Like he doesn't allow the urgency of the moment to steal away the opportunity for hospitality. He's constantly attentive to what the Holy Spirit is doing. So verse 47, and when the woman saw that she was not hidden. So basically, Jesus says, who touched me? Everybody backs up. But she's on the ground just trying to reach for his garment. So now everybody can see that she is the one who has touched Jesus, which is problematic. We'll talk about it, why, in just a second. When she saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling. And falling down before him, declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him and how she had been immediately healed. The reason this is frightening for her is because she had risked getting Jesus unclean. By touching Jesus, she was jeopardizing his ministry. That's why she didn't want to speak up and say it was me. That's why she was trembling in the moment, because she knew that everybody was around her and looking at her, and all of these people love Jesus, and all of these people want Jesus to do more for them and to do more in his ministry, and she's taking a huge social risk by being the one who touched Jesus, who risked interrupting his ministry. So I want you to watch how Jesus responds to her. Verse 48. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." I hope you're noticing Jesus is very intentional with the interruptions that he allows. Right? He allows those interruptions which give the greatest opportunity to put faith on display. Right? In the places where he sees the greatest opportunity for faith, he is consistently allowing interruption. But here's the key. He lived unhurried enough so that he was able to pay attention to the opportunities for faith that could grow and be put on display. So verse 49, it says this. While he was still speaking, someone from the ruler's house came and said, "Your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher anymore." Verse 50, but Jesus, on hearing this, answered him, "Do not fear, only believe," which is the same word as the faith of the woman earlier. Only believe, and she will be well. So now somebody from Jairus' house has come. He has come to Jairus to say, hey, don't bother Jesus any well. The game's up. Everything is over. Your daughter has died. And again, the emphasis here for Jairus and Jesus, the emphasis is placed on faith. Notice that the guy interrupted Jesus while he was speaking. Like that, Luke makes a point for us to say, while he was speaking, somebody came and interrupted and said to Jairus, your daughter is dead. And so Jesus, he's saying here, the interruption provides an opportunity. There's an opportunity for faith. See, Jairus has already started displaying faith by risking coming to Jesus, but Jesus has to tell Jairus, now that you've heard she's dead, I need you to keep your faith engaged. right? You don't stop believing now. Keep on going. And so verse 51, and when he came to the house, he allowed no one to enter with him except Peter and John and James and the father and mother of the child. Verse 52, and all were weeping and mourning for her. So Jesus has gone in with father and mother and a few of his disciples, and they come into a scene. In Jewish culture, when somebody passes away, it's like an immediate reaction. You have all people whose designated responsibility is to mourn for the loss of life. And so they come in and they start weeping and wailing for the life that has been lost. But there's a little bit of a disingenuousness to the role that they play. And so they're all weeping and mourning for her. But he said, do not weep, for she is not dead, but sleeping. And these people who, on one hand, in one moment, were just weeping and mourning, they laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But taking her by the hand, he called, saying, translations are so rough because they miss the intimacy of the moment. He's saying, little girl, it's time to get up. It's like, sweetheart, let's wake up now. That's what he says. He doesn't say, child, arise. Sweetheart, it's time to get up now. He comes down to her level and he wakes her up. In verse 55, her spirit returned. And she got up at once. And he directed that something should be given her to eat. All of this because Jesus was willing to allow some interruption into his life so that he could extend hospitality. So church, our main point this morning is this. Disrupt busyness by developing intentional and interruptible hospitality. If you want to talk about what does it take to remove busyness, well, it's going to take a little bit of intentionality. You're going to have to do a little bit of planning. You're going to have to have a little bit of an awareness of who are the people that Jesus has given to me. And then you're going to have to know what it's going to take to actually show those people hospitality. But then, at the same time, you're going to have to build in a little bit of an unhurried interruptibility into your life as well. So what? Number one, plan and prioritize rhythms of hospitality. So here's the thing. I talked about this last week. You will not become more hospitable by listening to me tell you how important it is for you to become hospitable. It's not going to work. Like, my words are not going to change you. The only way that you will become more hospitable is by practicing hospitality. You have to actually put it into practice. And in the age that we live in, if you do not set your schedule will set you. Right? So here's what I know. The last thing that most of us need is something additional to add to our schedule. But at the same time, loving the unchurched is not an optional part of the Christian life. So it's going to require you to sit down and make a plan. When we walk through with pastors, the pastors in my cohort, the cohorts that I've coached, it requires sitting down and making a plan. And then after a couple of months figuring out, okay, the first plan that I made didn't work, and I have to kind of rework that plan. So it's going to require that. So first of all, you need to know who your personal ministry sphere is. You need to know who are the people that he's given you responsibility for. And I want to just tell you in that you would always have room for one more person in that sphere. Always give the Lord permission to bring one more person into that personal ministry sphere. But then I'm going to tell you this. Once you know who he's called you to, you need to establish rhythms of regular interaction with those people. And that's what this is about. These are the kind of the practical strategies that we work through. So I'm going to explain to you what each of these means. So maximize two-fers. 2 for 1 special. That's what we're talking about here, right? So what is something that you have to do? Like you just are required to do. You cannot live your life without doing that thing. Is there some way that you can take one of those things that you have to do and do it with and around people who don't know Jesus? Right? Is there some way that you can take that thing that you have to do and do it with and around people who don't know Jesus? Everybody has to eat, right? And so maybe the thing that you need to do is like, every Wednesday night, I'm going to turn the grill on, and if y'all want to bring some meat over to put on the grill, we'll eat together and have a little bit of a barbecue. Maybe that's the thing, right? Something else that we all have to do. Well, we don't all have to do it, but I know that one thing that I had to do, right? Situation that I was in, I realized I need to start working out. I need to take some responsibility for my body, right? And so I started doing that, and I made sure that when I did that, I did it consistently at the same time so that I would see the same people when I went, so that I could also build a relationship with people when I'm going to work out. Right? So what are some things that you can do in your life to take something that you have to do and make sure that you do it around other people? Another one is do something that you enjoy with others, right? So if you, I don't know if you like reading science fiction. If you do like reading science fiction, I guarantee you can find like 25 science fiction book clubs in a 10 or 15 mile radius, right? Or if you like reading anything else, maybe you just find a book club somewhere. I'm sure you could find people that you could build relationship with others. Maybe you connect with others over shared pain. I think Debbie Romano is such a good example of this, and I know she probably doesn't want me to talk about her, but she knows how to listen to people's situations and then relate to that situation by something that she's experienced or something that she's seen in others. And there's, especially with grief share, there's this huge opportunity. If somebody's in the middle of grieving, to talk about the grief that you've went through, or to empathize with them in their grief. Right? So maybe you connect with others over a shared pain. Maybe you serve others and you yourself ask for help. Right? Maybe there's people in your community who need some kind of help, or you need to ask for help from them. Right? So you do this, and here's the thing. As you do this, you are going to encounter more relationships, a greater number of relationships. And so that's going to send you back to kind of retooling your plan and going, okay, this is who I thought was in my sphere, but now as I've done this a little bit, this is who I'm realizing is now in my sphere, and you kind of keep processing that and recycling that. And then from there, you make a plan. Once you know, okay, these are the people that the Lord has given me some favor with. Okay, so now how am I going to bless these people? How am I going to be salt and light in the lives of these people? So that's so what number one. So what number two? Learn to look for faith opportunities. So I don't want to give you a misconception this morning that Jesus was constantly available to everyone whenever they asked for him, because he wasn't. Jesus was not constantly available to everyone, but at the same time, he was interruptible. And it seems that most often he is allowing interruption for people who have the greatest potential of displaying faith. Right? So sometimes that potential comes from a moment of crisis. Sometimes it's coming from what hearing about what Jesus did for somebody else. Right? Sometimes it's just an awareness that God is near. And so when we talk about being interruptible, we're not saying to be interruptible for everyone, everywhere, at all times. But there's a good chance that a person, if I know that there's a good chance that a person will get closer to crossing the line of faith by me being interruptible for their sake, that I'm going to make space for that interruption. And so this is how much I believe in this thing, and I might get in trouble here, so we'll see what. This is how much I believe in this being interruptible. If you need to miss worship for a week because you have a unique opportunity with someone who is showing a potential for drawing closer to the line of faith. Right? If you have that unique opportunity, I'm going to tell you to call us, ask us to pray for you in the worship service that morning, and I'm going to tell you to go and be with that person. right? Because we want to see people come across the line of faith. Now, I'm not not saying every Sunday can't be a Sunday where, okay, Pastor, I'm going to spend time with people far from Jesus. I'll see you next week, or maybe not. I don't know. But there's an opportunity there, right? And if you're seeing the opportunity, let us pray for you. Let us support you from here on that and go and spend time with that person. And number 3, I'm going to tell you to rebel against the hurry of the age. Right? If you're living in a constant state of hurry, you're going to have a hard time being attentive to your own spiritual needs, much less the spiritual needs of the people that Jesus has given you responsibility for. So many of you have full-time, stressful jobs. Many have activities and clubs that you're involved in, and many are consumed with worry and fear because of just the circumstances that we live in. It feels like you have a lot on your plate and you can't imagine taking on responsibility for other things. And so part of what is even creating that worry and anxiety is the pace of how the kind of cultural situation that we're in has formed you and shaped you. And if you are hurried to the point that you can't imagine sitting down to kind of reprioritize your schedule and think about what this would look like, then maybe what you need to do is actually sit down and take inventory of your entire approach and mindset and thinking about life, right? And figure out what is it going to take for you to be able to slow down enough so that you can be attentive to what the Lord is doing in you and the lives of others around you. So I want to share a quote with you and then we'll close. This quote comes from a pastor named Tyler Staton in his book, Praying Like Monks and Living Like Fools. He says this: Jesus was intentional and interruptible. There's a word for that posture: unhurried. Hurry is the great enemy of the spiritual life. Why? Because hurry kills love. Hurry hides behind anger, agitation, and self-centeredness, blinding our eyes to the truth that we are God's beloved, and she is sister, and he is brother. Church, would you pray with me, please? So, Lord Jesus, would you grant us the grace of becoming an unhurried people? Would you grant us the space to be able to be attentive to what it is that you're up to in us and what it is that you're up to in the lives of others? And Holy Spirit, would you equip us to be able to see who are the people that you've given to me? I pray that for each person in this room, Lord, that you would give us clarity and discernment to who our personal ministry spheres are. That you would enable us to notice the unchurched and the de-churched and what you're doing in their lives. And that you would shape and form us to be salt and light in the lives of those people, so that we might become the kind of people who can help others encounter you. So Jesus, would you grant us this grace, and would you continue to remind us of the depth of your love for us, because we know it is your love for us that shapes us into people that love others. So we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.